It is my pleasure to introduce Grant Moyle. He is a two-time Google Cloud Trainer of the Year and has trained thousands of business and technology professionals around the world. Grant is the Chief Technology Officer and Master Trainer at ROI Training and has worked with the world's leading organizations, including NASA, NHI, Google, Goldman Sachs, Mayo Clinic, and HSBC. ROI is an advanced AWS technology tier training partner and has been awarded Training Partner of the Year 6 times by Google Cloud. ROI has authorized 10 generative AI classes and trained over 500,000 people on cloud and AI technologies. Please welcome to the podium for his incredible presentation this morning, Grant Moyle.
All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome. It's nice to be at the Space Center, huh? Better than the office, right? All right, it's also warmer here. I'm from Chicago, so yeah, I think we're 40 degrees today. I don't know. All right, so I'm a big fan of Space Camp here. My son goes here. My boss's son goes here. We love Space Camp, so we were really excited when they asked us to come and give a talk. So now, mine's not gonna. I'm not a robot, by the way. I'm real. I guess I'm the first real presenter of the day. So woohoo! All right. Or maybe you'll decide that afterwards. Just depends how. All right. So mine's going to be a little more practical. We're going to talk today about how these tools are actually available kind of today to begin using. And we'll start by looking at what could I give my user, or what could I give my day-to-day staff to kind of look at with it after we lay just a couple little pieces of foundational work. And then we're going to look at how maybe we can help developers, and then sort of build out business tools and how we basically enable generative AI technologies inside of the business. I mean, that video is amazing we watched. Don't expect to do that your first time playing with the AI and generative AI type tools. I mean, that video, but do you see at the end, I noticed the cost. That was gonna be $1.5 million if you got actors and all that together to put that together. But I suspect that was a lot cheaper to do with digital. In fact, if you saw the notes at the end, there was notes there about like the writers and the actors and all that, because this is a disruptive technology. Now, I've been in IT, I've been doing technology for, since the mid-90s when I was a grad student. And I first studied neural networks that long ago. We actually did a class, but I didn't have the computing technology. We were trying to actually solve little biomedical type problems. And it was, I got 1 or 2 CPUs, maybe 4 gigs of RAM. I wasn't going to get anywhere, so I left it. But now here we are, 20, 25 years. I guess that was 95, 90, yeah, I guess about almost 30 years. Oh, that's the scary part. Times have changed. The cloud, virtualization, artificial intelligence, and now the next step, the generative AI. So we're going to talk a little bit about generative AI does, why it's important, practical uses, and then I'm going to do live demo. And we're going to do some kind of cool things that maybe you're not sure you can do yet. But as I said, I'm going to keep it real. I'm going to keep it tools that you can get your hands on today. We're also going to talk a little bit about, so we'll do a little bit of a survey seeing what different offerings are coming from different vendors. And then we'll also say, hey, where do I go from here? And then a few little warnings, because that is one of those things. It's when I start using my data in the cloud and other places, is it safe? Is it is what happens to my data? So we'll give you some warnings to kind of go away with. Now, a lot of this will help you set up also for a lot of the other sessions coming up. I was looking at the schedule, what's happening over the next several days. You'll probably see a lot more depth in a lot of these others. We're going to be kind of doing a bit of a survey across the whole spectrum here. Okay, so what's the big deal? Why now? Well, if we were to break down AI's been around forever, okay? I did it in the 90s. My dad probably did it in the 70s. We didn't call it there. In the 90s, we were taking sample data and trying to say, if I've got all these examples, can I use that to kind of figure out the algorithm that relates everything together? Now, that brought on kind of machine learning. So that's sort of the subset that's taking my historical data and basically trying to figure out the algorithm that relates all that data together. So what's generative AI? It's to create the new content. Okay, now we'll kind of contrast a little though. So we all see, hey, I can upload a picture into Amazon or Google or any of those and they'll tell me what's in the picture. because they have machine learning models. They said, here's a bunch of people with, or a bunch of animals, here's a bunch of pictures of dogs, here's a bunch of pictures that aren't dogs, and give me an algorithm that relates to two different. Now, we do that these days with medical x-rays. I've got a machine learning model running behind the scenes right now that literally will take a chest x-ray and tell me, does that patient have pneumonia or not? Well, are they likely to have pneumonia? Now, if we think about when COVID happened, we were in the ML world at that point. We were really starting to get ML, and we were really starting to take our data and say, we've got all these examples. We have no idea what they all mean, but here we have the x-rays, here we have blood work, we have all this of one patient, we have all this of another patient. How do we differentiate? This patient had COVID, this one didn't. Where is that in that information? We can't see it, but maybe the computer can, using multidimensional math and all that other fun stuff. We want the algorithm relating. So we use it for image recognition, we use it for language, use it for customer segmentation. Maybe you're kind of breaking down how my customer recommendations, all that sort of stuff. That's been out there now. That's like old school. How many use ML in at least something you use? Everybody, right? Piece of cake, examples. So what makes generative AI? Well, if ML is what is the picture, generative AI is generate me a picture of camping on the moon. Is this following post that's been posted on Twitter, or X, I guess now, positive or negative? Instead, write me a positive review of adult space camp, or a restaurant, or a recommendation letter for somebody. Or is this email spam? Well, we've been battling that one for 20 years. We're still not any better because, well, the spammers just use the same tools too, and they figure out, well, how do we get by the spam filter? Write me a response to an email. So that's what makes it generative AI, is that we're actually generating new content. We're not looking for the algorithm. So it's not Uber, which has taken millions of previous trips, both taxi trips initially and then their own trips, to predict what your fare is going to be. This is something completely different. This is something where we're going to look at the data and guess what's out there in the future. Now, at the heart of all this is what we call the LLM, the large language model. Now, when you think about machine learning, we're looking at an algorithm. Large language models are massive scale. Basically, they absorb enormous amounts of material. For example, the latest version of ChatGPT is said to have run for 90 to 100 days on 25,000 NVIDIA A100s. Okay? That's a GPU with like 80 gigs of RAM. You put 8 of them per server, so you do the math in there, and you're talking thousands of servers crunching away for 90 to 100 days. You don't build one of these models like we do on a workbench with a simple ML model. We crunch these for months. Same thing happening at Google with these. Google builds dedicated processors to do this, called TensorFlow TPUs. The scale of these things are massive to actually go through and program these. And basically, they absorb what they're given and find information in them, and then use that to basically generate other things. So what they seem to do is they seem to understand what you're asking in a human way. Now, how does that enable people to actually do things? Well, one of the things is writing letters. How many of you when's the last time you wrote a letter? You used a template, right? But I can tell when I get a template. It's a standard letter, standard, this. But what if I want to uniquely create some letters using several pieces of information? What if I want to assemble that? I'm sure here at Space Camp, you guys are writing letters all the time. You're writing recommendation letters for counselors who pass through, spend a few years here, and then move on to college and things, and they're asking you to write recommendations like crazy. And my wife does the same thing. She teaches anatomy in Chicago, and she's always writing for her med students. They're like, hey, can I get, or her undergrads want to go to med school. And she's like, yeah, I write the letter. She's got pretty much a boilerplate. Instead, can she change it? Can she actually provide that little bit more information? We'll see an example of that. And then how can I make that reusable? Because that's the next part. I could go use these cut and paste sort of ideas. And so I can enable my day-to-day users who just want to do some things. But how would I actually make that a process? Now, I've got opportunity in the last 8 years to work at Google as a trainer. So I've been globe-trotting. I think in 2019, I did 300,000 miles and 6 continents. Sorry, not 8. 8 would be the moon, I guess, right? Is that what we're going to call that one? Yeah, we should ask Google what's the 8th continent. Yeah, they wouldn't send me an Antarctica. I tried. But in doing that experience, I learned something that happens at Google. Now, Google's got over 1 billion users on 9 different products. If you have 1 billion users, you cannot touch every user manually. You can't do that with 1 million users. Heck, you could probably not do that with 1,000 campers that might be here in a course of time. Automation is key. Now, the first time you do something around Google, you probably do it by hand. The second time we think, how do we automate it? And the third time we automate it. So whenever we're using something, we look at how can we actually automate that stuff. And that's what we're up to. So LLMs help because they can give that creativity sort of nature in there as well. Now, we can also set context. So when you start to have a chat, just like the chatbots, yeah, chatbots have been around for several years. Were they here before generative AI? They were, but they weren't very human. How many of you think you've talked to a chatbot, but you're not sure? Yeah, it's kind of like, I think there's some, I don't know, are you a person or human? I always get the phone call, are you a person or human? And they're like, well, I'm a human, but I'm only allowed to provide certain responses. I'm like, yeah, right. Not a human. But these are getting more and more intricate in the way we do them. And basically, we're adding examples of how we want it to respond. We're training it. Now, we hear about a lot of large language models. There are actually a lot of them, but the big ones, Google's Palm, and now Google's Gemini. Okay, Gemini is the latest one. In fact, if you ever used Bard, Bard got renamed about 2 weeks ago to Gemini, and it's their latest model. ChatGPT, you hear about like ChatGPT 3.5 or 4.0. 4.0 is their latest model. That comes out of the OpenAI group. Meta's Llama, Microsoft's Turing, and there's also a ton of others. And we'll talk about a couple places you can actually go, and you can actually do small-scale models building if you're into coding and things. And if you're into no-code type solutions, there's a lot of platforms to actually let you go train on your type data. But it's all about worker productivity. How do I make my employees more productive? Okay, customer service is probably number one. How can you get business? You basically start to take a look at your customer service. Now, we've been doing this before generative AI was even the word in everybody's mind. It was the ML. It was Ocado, which is a grocery chain over in Europe, routing when a customer types in an email, says, I'm not going to be home for my delivery between 4 and 6 p.m. Can I reschedule? And that going into a mailbox somewhere and sitting in the mailbox not getting routing, or 4 full-time people processing that. Instead, to say, okay, this message we routed to deliveries. My groceries arrived and all the eggs were broken. Okay? That's a customer service. Route those around. It doesn't take a lot. It's a feedback loop, though. It's create a few examples, say, how did we route these few, and then send more. But to actually say, with that, I need lots and lots of data in many cases. But to actually reduce the amount of data I need, because it is just tone of the message. Is it positive? Is it negative? What exactly is it relating to? And with a lot of examples. Now, we saw text-to-speech today. You saw it in that video. That was not a person reading that. It did sound like at one point, I swore I knew the actor in one of those, right? It was like the man speak about halfway through. It's on the tip of my tongue. I can't remember who, but it was like, that sounds a lot like, but nope, that was all text-to-speech. And those engines are there. Now, I'm a little worried about that because for the last 3 or so years, I've been sitting in a virtual world teaching training classes behind a camera and all that, and I'm just waiting for that script. You know, they say, yeah, Grant, just type a script for your slides, and then, yeah, just submit that. And then I'll never hear again from somebody because that class will be taught. But luckily, they won't have the human element yet. But it won't be long before it'll generate the answer to the question. And next thing you know, well, it'll just change. That's okay. I'll be ready to retire. I figure I got about 10 years on that. Now then I'll be good. All right. But all these sort of things, these changes the way that people interact. Marketing, large language models we see a lot in marketing, both good and bad. Advertising, copy, social media posts, all sorts of things. And we can use that. And then financial services, robo-advisors. Anybody using a robo-advisor? You're going to hear more and more about them because it's like, I want to take $100 out of my paycheck every 2 weeks, and I want to put it in, and I want it to grow. And a little robo-advisor, no fees, all that sort of stuff, is probably going to be able to do much better for that customer than one who, the advisors that charge, hundreds of thousands of dollars in managing portfolios for millionaires and things like that. What about the little guy? They're probably going to do just as good, if not better, because that information is out there. How do we know? We don't necessarily see it, but AI has the potential to go do those things. Financial fraud detection, that's been an area for years. Back in the 90s, we used to bucketize you. Basically, your credit card company said, this is the sort of customer you are, put you in a bucket, and then when your credit card transactions came through, they said, why is this person buying 3 washers and dryers at Sears? That's probably a fraudulent transaction, except if you owned an apartment building, that might not be. So, but these days, it's a lot more dynamic than that. I used to have to tell whenever I traveled internationally, tell my credit card company. Now they just kind of know that I'm traveling overseas. They're like, well, we figured that out because, well, you were at an airport, and 6 hours later, you were in London, and then, yeah, we figured all that out. So being able to do that, but also analyze, use a large language model to actually look and break down big, ugly, technical type things and break them down in a human readable form. Medical is an area kind of dear to my heart. I worked in the medical field since undergrad and grad school back in the 90s. And Google and others are producing medical-specific models where they actually can help diagnose. Now, we're not talking to replace the doctors. What we're doing is we need to supplement. If you've been to an emergency room, you need to be screened, you need an x-ray. That x-ray doesn't get read, but your doctor is not an expert on reading x-rays. Your doctor, they go and say, hey, you got a knee. Yeah, let's go get an x-ray of your knee. Let's send that x-ray. That x-ray goes to a radiologist who may be in a total another part of the world who's an expert at reading that x-ray. But that takes time. What if we can get some preliminary work? So that chest x-ray idea, retinal scans, all sorts of things, the data's there. So we can use this. We can also use it to do all the paperwork stuff. We can also use it to analyze doctors' notes. Now, my father died about 6 years ago of cancer, esophageal cancer. And when I actually was talking to his oncologist after he passed, and he said, your dad shouldn't have died for another 2 months. I'm like, how come you didn't tell me this? And he said, well, something happened that we didn't really expect there. And I'm saying, where was it 2 months? He says, it's probably in the notes, but I don't think I singled it out anywhere. But that doctor's, it's probably in those notes there, in the tone. So when we start to look at medical records and things like that to actually monitor success of treatments and other things like that, let alone you can imagine the genetic implications of that. We just being able to analyze things. Yeah, we might be talking Jurassic Park there too. Who knows? All right. And then manufacturing. Manufacturing, there's lots of these use cases, a lot of places. But let's get down to why we might want to just get started today. It's not something you're going to change everything in your business by next week, but you can start to work with it just a little bit. Now, I'm going to start, and we're going to go use a couple things. I'm going to spend about 15 minutes here doing live demos, okay? You ready? We expect a few to blow up on us. That's the more fun part. So let's help Space Camp out today. Let's look at just off-the-shelf tools that I might be able to use to help me out. So I'm going to start just with a web browser. I'm going to jump up here. I'm in Microsoft Edge. And over here in Microsoft Edge, I added Copilot. So Microsoft Edge, and Microsoft calls their product Copilot. They partnered up, a lot of this is coming out of the ChatGPT engines. But over here, I can be on a website, and I'm actually at the consortium. Yeah, here's a list of speakers here. Okay, so it's like, all right, we built the website, and we need a list of the speakers. Let's see, is this just not scrolling for me? It's just scrolling over here because I'm focused. All right, so let's go and ask it to do something. Give me a list of speakers, or yeah, give me a summary of speakers. And let's see what happens. All right, well, that was my one from earlier. Here's a concise summary of the speakers. So we got these speaker blurbs up on the site, talks about all the 30 or 40 speakers we have here. And what happens? We get a nice little summary. It gave me the first 5. And I could go ahead and get more if I need it. Now, it didn't get me because it's alphabetical there, but that's okay. Let's go. We're going to ask it, tell me about Grant Moyle. Let's see. Now, when I ran this earlier, Copilot didn't just find the information on that page. It went and found some information about here, found out about the company I work with, expertise. There we go. Okay. Gee, it's almost like I might have used this to write my own bio. Let's see. Oh, and my doppelganger is a senior wealth advisor in another part of the world. All right. Okay, so kind of helps me a little bit. Tell me about everything I need to know. So it kind of just helps me with research. Okay, so your browsers are getting enabled. It's just search on steroids, though, because suddenly I don't need to go to a bunch of other different places. I could go ahead and grab what I need. So I could tell more, how do I contact, all sorts of information. It's grabbing information because the large language model behind this has scoured the web. Now, this is not doing it live, however, and it wasn't necessarily trained live. One thing you need to recognize about these large language models, how long did it take the ChatGPT to train? What did I say, 90 to 100 days on 25,000 NVIDIA GPUs? So that's going to be a specific point in time, sort of a snapshot of the world when that model. So you're always going to see new models have to be built. Just like Uber. Uber's not using a model they built 5 years ago to predict your fare because it doesn't take into account all the traffic. These things have to be updated. So they can become stale, but they also take a lot of money to do, so it's the big vendors doing it. All right. Now, we're going to shift to the real stuff, though. You can start playing with the browsers whenever. I'm going to grab ChatGPT. So let's see. Here's my ChatGPT demo. So I've got a license to ChatGPT here. And we're going to go ahead and ask ChatGPT. Let's see, the first thing we're going to go down and ask ChatGPT. Let's grab the web page. Let's grab the Space Camp website. So we'll grab the Space Camp, and let's go ahead and let's grab, we'll just tell it to, let's tell it to summarize this. So we're going to say summarize this website. Oh, sorry, I need to actually create one, sorry. We'll create one, here we go, that's what I was looking for. Summarize this website. ChatGPT is going to go out and say, all right, let me see what that website is. So I'm going to read that website, and it's going to come back and tell me, doing research with Bing, gives me a nice little understanding, a little summary of that web page, so I don't need to review that. Now, I downloaded a gigantic NASA document published in early January. So this document here, this document was Congressional Research Service, a nice big long document that, oh my goodness, do I need to know what this is about? I don't want to read it. How many of you don't like to read big long documents? All right, so what am I going to do? I'm going to tell ChatGPT, I'm just going to give it that document. I'm going to say this one here, and I'm going to say summarize the document. So Chat's going to read the document. It's going to come back and tell me. Now, there we go. Now, I can enhance what it is. Let's take a look. All right, so, okay. Give me a summary for a 12-year-old. Now, how handy is that? That's pretty neat, because you've suddenly got this document that probably doesn't mean a lot, and you've made it inspiring and exciting and all sorts of stuff. And those are the sort of things we start to do with this. Now, okay, so let's go a little bit more practical. So Space Camp, you probably have to deal with rosters of students, and you need to break them up into different teams and all this sort of stuff. You don't have the rosters yet, so let's ask it to generate me 100 rows of sample data with first name, last name, age between 9 and 11, be my son's group at Space Camp, city, state, and make about 12% international. Anybody ever have to create sample data? This is what I used to make the interns do in the 90s. I had to do it once in the bank in the 90s was, you need to create dummy data so we have data to practice with. Here we go. 100 rows, sample data, first name, last name, age 9 to 11, city, state, and about 12% of the kids international. Now, I probably should have added a column, have they been to camp before, sort of thing. We could evenly analyze them. But if we think about how would I actually, where would I start? If you had to do this, if we gave this to a person who's used to using Excel and Word, where would they even start? Are they going to start just creating things? How are they going to actually build this? Now, it's not just something we need to do here. It's everywhere. If you're a developer, you need to create some sample code. You need to mock some code up. There we go. We got Tammy Tucker from Chester, Kansas. Okay. Thomas Dad. Okay. That's okay. All right. Just a preview. Would I like to download it? It's going to give that here with a mix. Are you going to give it to me for download? Oh, well, ooh, I like this even better. Should be a file to download here. Oh, anybody excited about what they just see here? How many people know what to do with that? Python, right? That's the code. It actually generated me the code for what I have there. And let's just say download. See if we can download the file. Sample data. Let's see what it does. Are you going to let me download it? Here we go. Here's our sample data. Cool. We're going to download it. So now I just generated that sample data. It's probably sitting over here in my downloads file with a bunch of other downloads I have. Sample data, so it made me a nice little CSV. Put it in there. All right. Now, did it get me international? Oh, it did. We have some international students in there. Yep. All right, cool. So now let's pretend we're somebody else, though. Somebody else on the team. So here's your sample data. So I'm going to pop in here. I'm going to start a brand new session. And I'm going to say, I'm going to upload that file. So I'm going to pretend, I'm somebody else on the team who gets the file. And I'm going to take that sample data. And I'm going to say, using the sample data, break the groups, break the lines into 5 groups, and ensure each group has at least 1 international student. Now, how many think would that come in handy? Anybody think this would be handy here? No code. This is how I basically enable my users right away to start using this stuff. So here we go. There's no direct indication that students are international. We might need to infer this. Without explicit markers for that, I'll assume an approach. Okay. Hey, I think it's going to do what we asked it to. Now, sometimes you fail. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it works a little bit different than the way you did it yesterday because you're prompt. Now, I think there's a workshop. Is it Thursday or Friday? One of the sessions you can sign up. I think the space is limited on, so be sure, is on prompt engineering, where you actually learn how do you actually talk to these, because a lot of it's about prompt. Now, as a user, you're going to kind of speak in human to it. When you start to develop your web applications that actually do this, because I can embed this in my own applications, that Python code, it generated for me, but if I actually wanted to call ChatGPT or Duet AI or those sort of, or within Google or any of the models, I can actually embed that in my own code and call it. We'll see that a little bit later. We'll see how our developers get a hand. So we could then just have some simple parameterization. Say, how many rows do you want? What do you want? It generates, and we're good to go. So there we go. Students have been successfully distributed. Each group has 19 with each group containing 19. Did I typo that? Okay. I don't know that. Sometimes it hallucinates. We'll mention that here at the end. But this is just a simple example. Now, I'm going to go back to the Space Camp website summary back here. I'm going to pop back here. And let's edit this one. Summarize. I'm going to just rerun that. Might come out with a little bit different. All right. Make me a brochure. Brochure using, can't even spell brochure here, because brochure using the above information. Okay, there we go. All right, cool, discover more. Okay, great. Let's do create me images for the cover of the brochure. Image creation. Now, we don't have to go hire actors. Years ago, it used to be funny on training catalogs, we used to mail them out and all that. They would use models. It would never be us as trainers on the catalog. They always hired models in here. What this is going to do is kind of generate us some ideas. Now, even if it's just about getting ideas for things, there we go. You like it? I think that's cool. I'm like, dang. Yeah? I'm excited. I'm going to get that in the mail. And my kid's like, I got to go there, Dad. Well, he already gets to come here, so. All right. So this sort of thing, the idea of just being able to chat, and this is not a tool that requires crazy training or deep tech programming skills. I can start using this. When we talk about using generative AI today, these are sort of tools we can start working with. Now, we don't just have to rely on, so this is ChatGPT. You can use Copilot in Microsoft Office. It's like an add-on license, and in Google, and I'll show you the Google one, we're going to use Duet here. So I'm going to jump over to my Duet, and I'm going to pop into just a Google document. And using my Google document, I'm going to say, write me a letter for Brian, a counselor at Space Camp, and I can't even spell today. Counselor at Space, I didn't even spell, all right, that's going to have to be a solicitor. Solor at Space Camp, yeah, I still can't. Thank goodness for spell check. I like to say I can type 60 words a minute with a good spell check. Now it doesn't even want to give me, all right, we'll just let it figure out. Space Camp, who has worked here for 6 years. My name is Grant Moyle, and he is applying to be an astronaut. Right, Brian? We're going to make you an astronaut? Let's see what it can come up with. All right, high spirits. Having worked with you closely, I've witnessed you firsthand doing all this. Your contributions have been invaluable, so you embark in a new chapter. I have no doubts. On behalf of that, there we go. Is that a lot better than probably what we write now for our campers or for our counselors? Yeah. Now, who could see a problem with this sort of thing? I got a high schooler. What's my high schooler going to start doing? Yeah, they're going to start writing. College applications already know a lot of this stuff. So it is one of these things that it's a change. You may get a beautifully written letter suddenly as a recommendation, and so it's always a little bit of a double-edged sword in here. So these tools, so this is Google's Duet AI, which is an add-on license for Google Docs. If you're in your Gmail, your personal accounts, a lot of these things kind of wind up being free, but in the corporate world, we pay extra for them because they streamline, they speed up a lot of what we do. Now I'm going to pop over here to Google Worksheet, and we'll do one more thing here we'll do for Space Camp. I'm going to pop over here, and I'm going to create a custom template. Create a template to track the 12-stage, or track the training mission of 12 campers at a week-long space camp in Huntsville. Probably give it too much information. See what it comes up with. Now, how many of you ever hate building pretty-looking Excel spreadsheets, but you wish you could because you got somebody else on your team who does, who's really good at it? Let's see what we get. Come on, go. You can do it. Come on. There we go. Look at that. This is a little bit scary, though. Does this actually look like maybe what a schedule looks like here at Space Camp? I don't know, 9 a.m. check-in, 10 a.m. they got orientation, they got a mission briefing, campers eat lunch, they got engineering, learn about engineering principles. But I don't know, it looks kind of cool. And there's lots of variations. I can say, hey, I want to try some other things. But all of a sudden creating simple ways to organize information. So this is as we start to enable these sort of tools. So we could do all sorts of fun things, don't you think? Now, we're going to go use Gemini now. So I'm going to pop into Gemini. So Gemini is Google's competition to ChatGPT. So Gemini here, I'm going to chat with Gemini. Whoop, I need to use my Gmail account. That's why I had that. Let me pop over to my Gmail account. Gemini, Google, let's go over to Gemini. All right, here we go. So I'm just going to use my personal Gmail. So with my personal, so this is free on somebody's Gmail. If you start using corporate, you got to have the appropriate measures in place because we don't want corporate data kind of winding up in there, but a user playing around. So we're going to say, let's generate a song about space using examples from Elton John and David Bowie. Let's see. We're going to make a new theme song for Space Camp. There we go. Look at that. Gravity's piano is a piano key. Earth hangs heavy in the night. All right. Rewrite in the tone of a pirate. That's my favorite thing to do. I did this with my father-in-law. So he's retired now, but he had just for fun, I went and generated a review of he was an ophthalmologist, of his practice. I said, give it to me in the tone of a pirate. It's like, ahoy, if you got problems with your peepers. And so, yeah, I could do this and say, but again, we often want to say, rewrite in the tone of a 11-year-old. Now, we could say set it to music. It's not actually going to give us music. We need to go to some specialized services, but they do exist out there that will generate you music and other things. So we say, set it to music. Now let's see what it says. I think it says I can't generate it. Unfortunately, I can't physically create music. I can provide you with the lyrics. Here's the structure, melody, chorus, the verse, and all that. There we go. So all of a sudden, we could rewrite all sorts of things. But these are sort of the tools that are available. Now, everything I did with ChatGPT, I could do over here with Gemini. So all of these different tools do a lot of different things for us. Now, so I don't know, is there at least one item there you could take away and want to go back and play with and try out? Now, those of you with kids, have fun. Sit down with your kids and show them. I love when I get to go home from work and sit down with my 11-year-old, or if I can track down my 16-year-old, sit down and say, let's look at what I did at work today. Let's go have a little bit of fun. So years ago, my daughter and I made a superhero machine learning model, basically to predict the type of superhero based on a picture, because she thought she could put her brother into it and determine did he fly, at which point she'd probably push him off the stage. He ended up showing mind power. So she locked him in his room for a couple hours and we were out. But these tools are out there to let you do these things, and they're not expensive to get into. They're experimental. You can experiment. You can try something. It might fail, and you can go on to something else, and you can try something else. And so we're very much in that sort of exploration stage with a lot of this. But hopefully you can kind of see a bit of the roadmap, some of these benefits out there for us to begin to see these. Now, so I was using Google's Duet. Duet's a set of tools that let me enable, and I was actually in my business project there until I tried to switch over to Gemini there. Now, there's also Duet AI for workspaces, which is for code developers and things. Microsoft Copilot, that's their product line that deals with the generative. So if you use Word and Excel, all those features are available in there as add-ons to let you go through and generate charts and graphs. Do things that you're like, I don't know how to do a mail merge. Right? Yeah, you can find a wizard to do it, but it could be like, here, I've created you a sample file, and here's your template. So these sort of things allow us to do it. GitHub, Copilot helps with code developers for code generation. And that's sort of going to be the next step I'm going to look at. So I'm going to jump in here. I'm using Google's extension inside my Visual Studio. And I'm going to pop in. I'm going to create a new file. I'm just going to do Python. And I'm going to say, I need to talk to an AWS. I need to get an AWS secret out of AWS. Okay, I could Google, find some sample code, download it, but let's see. Access a secret in AWS Secret Manager. And I'm just going to hit Control, Enter. There's my code. Now, what do you think of that? Any developers? Like, okay, That seemed a little bit too easy, but I could have copy and pasted that from the web. You're probably right. You copy and paste it from the web. I want you to explain that code to me. What's that code doing? It's actually breaking down my code. Now, when I start to basically tell me what is this code, so I all of a sudden am looking at code, I can basically have it tell me what does this part do? Maybe I'm not sure what that is. And I can also work on generate my unit tests. Oh, if you're a developer, you're like, oh, I can generate my tests? Yep, over here, here's my unit tests on how to make sure that's working. Now, we don't necessarily trust the code 100%, but you just don't trust the code on the website or anywhere else 100%. What you use this for is to basically accelerate. Now, we used to use a term in developer world of extreme programming. The problem is the paired programmer is expensive. You got two programmers, one on the keyboard, one's the browser. You get much more better quality code. Why? Because somebody else is watching it. You know, if you're ever writing code, the semicolon is in the wrong place. You know, all this. I got extra tab. If you're a Python person, tabs are the most annoying thing out of Python for me. But what you've got is you've now got that co-pilot beside you. We hear about the military doing it, right? They want to use drones in conjunction with aircraft to basically, you could send the drone ahead a little bit or other things. Same thing here. I've got a co-pilot. I've got somebody sitting on my shoulder who basically can help me with my coding. When I'm stuck, if my syntax isn't quite right, that's one of those things a lot of people, just the syntax. Now, you can use a lot of these tools. I could actually take this code over here, and I could go drop it into, well, I can't, I don't think I have Java loaded on here, but if I go over to Gemini, I'm going to start a new Gemini conversation. I'm going to say, there's my code, and I'm going to say, convert the code to Java. Oh, there we go. Now they're telling me, okay, that didn't exactly go right. There's my first blow up on me. Didn't quite do what I wanted to there. It's kind of telling me about how to use that particular library. But there are, let's see, what else? What were the others? I got drafts. Okay, they're telling me they can't access and process code secrets. Okay, they just didn't understand that code. Let's give chat a little bit of idea here. Let's just grab ourselves a new chat. Convert this code to Java. Yep, please upload the file. There we go. We'll give them the code. Now, it knows context. It should be able to pick up the information above. Notice I didn't have to tell it again, there's the code. I got my order out of order, but it kind of figured out what I needed. This is not historical. This is, I'm figuring out what you want. I'm taking that natural language, I'm taking that human, and it's gone and converted me in all my code here. Now, again, might not be ready to go, but how many times developers have you gone looking for a sample code and it's in the wrong language? It's worked quite effectively. Now, what's the risk? There's got to be risk to this stuff. You don't want your employees just uploading their code into public websites. You need to be on commercial tools before we do that, and that's what's happening when you are enabling these tools like the Copilot, like the Duet AI for developers. Microsoft's not keeping that code around and adding to their base. And where they're turning the enterprise products is to actually look at and say, here's my code base. Recognize my code patterns. Only around your data. Your data's not going into the model, but you're getting basically a derived model of your data. So now you get a new developer on your team and you find they're doing wrong, they're casing their variables differently. They're using different syntax on their variables. You're quickly getting those refactored to sort of the standards. Something that's like one of those mythical beasts in business is everybody uses the same syntax everywhere. So being able to do this, so it's not just the end users, you know, we got the tools we saw, now we've got our developers to do this. But then how do I operationalize? Because that's the other piece. I want to operationalize these things. I want to actually take these and embed them in my website. So when somebody asks my chatbot, or I've got an internal tool, I want to write these recommendation letters, and literally with some simple website programming and the underlying code, how do I call these underneath? And we'll look at that here in just a minute. Let's go through a couple. Drop. So where's the money at, right? Anything we saw, would anything there save money for the business? Yeah, all of those. Now, at ROI, we use it to write materials. We actually will write a course outline. But this course here, my buddy Doug put this slide deck together a few months back, and he sat down and told, I think he told at the time Bard, he said, hey, give me a 2-level outline for a course on generative AI. And all the images in our slide deck here, except maybe this one he might have written, but all of our images are all coming, we're not using stock footage from whoever those folks who love to sell you images are. And all the cloud providers, Google, and I noticed on that presentation today, they're indemnifying you of copyright issues that if what you used was generated by them, they'll help defend it if somebody accuses you of copying their work. So, yeah, there's a lot of that we need that because we're seeing a lot is where were they all trained on and things. But writing a course outline, I can use my generative AI to that. I can ask it to extrapolate on a particular topic. I can produce slides and edit the slides, and I can do all that in, all these tools are enabled in PowerPoint and Google presentation stuff. And I can put it all together, and I can even streamline my publishing operations of converting them to PDF and other formats and things like that. Part we don't see in there, but one we recently was to also add accessibility options. One of the big things we now see with documents have to be accessible. Translation is getting much better than where we saw it with the ML models a few years ago. Now, some of the translation is actually in business context and others, and you can improve on that. Regulatory compliance. I can only imagine a number of people in here, given this area, there's a lot of government work going on, right? I think there's a lot of times you need to produce a lot of documentation off the information you have, the summarization. Think about what I did with that document earlier. I asked it to summarize that NASA document. I could have actually gone, hey, give me more bullet points, give me more details, break it down further. Extract information from unstructured documents, so text documents. Reports, TPS reports, right? Somebody got that one, all right. Review documents before shipping them, look for sensitive information. Now, customer service, obviously there's tons of ways from what I've just shown you. But again, how do I start to operationalize this? Chat bots and voice bots are some of the first ones. They're the ones receiving a lot of the current technology jumps. We used to train. So at HSBC about 5 years ago, we trained an internal chat bot to deal with regulatory compliance. So if an internal employee wanted to look something up, would say, is this a conflict of interest? Is this customer, is this possible fraud? They could actually put that into an internal site, and it had trained on their previous reports they have had. Because if you work in a financial or a highly regulated industry, there's a lot of things you go through regular security training, quarterly, right? And you have to also go through and compliance stuff. And emails need to be screened in and out and things. So, whether it be chatbots or other things to actually do that. And then text-to-speech, speech-to-text, those come fairly easily these days. Enterprise search it's really funny because enterprise search has kind of come full circle. So back in Google in the early 2000s, you would get a Google box, put it into your network, and give it access to all your files, and it would conduct a search of all your files and index all your files for you. They called it a Google Apply It, and it literally sat in your rack, and it was a googly color. Those all but disappeared because it was, well, we could do it all in the cloud, and we could do enterprise search. But now what we do is we take it that next level, and they'll take it and they'll index all those documents against using the LMM concept, but basically one just around your documents to make discovery. Now you're like, well, doesn't Google Drive do that for me if I'm using Google Drive? It does. But think about that on steroids against all of your content internally. So you need to look, whether it be legal discovery, I need to find all documents that represent this particular item or this particular text or things. So these are being used to basically, this is the evolution of all these things, to go from what do I have and what was the model to what can I tell you about this. And it also helps in preventing the reworking of the same thing over and over, because finding things in business can be tricky. Where is that document? Where exactly am I looking for? And to allow complex analysis. So code generation, GPT, Gemini, they've basically been trained on code, and you can actually tell it to write you code. Now, this is the scary part, and this is why we turn this off in a lot of businesses. A lot of businesses says employees can't go to Gemini or bard.google.com. They can't go there at all. One, because can we trust the code coming out of it? But two, are they going to do what I did and paste in their code? And what happened to that? Part of that just needs education. It needs to be people that need to understand what they're doing and why we don't do it that way, or why, and put the appropriate controls, just like everything in business. Now, here's just a little bit of summary of some of the common terms you see. So you hear about GPTs. The OpenAI, their big tools are GPT, which is their LLM model. ChatGPT, big, their sort of tooling. DALL-E is their image generation, although a lot of the image generation now happens naturally in the engines. They're actually using the large language models, but they're also supporting other things. And then OpenAI is programmers to let you, programmability. Google's Vertex AI, which is what I'll end with a demonstration on, is their sort of programming platform for AI and ML. Palm is their original LLM that they released, and then now Gemini being the new one. Enterprise Search, Generative AI Studio, tools for building apps, and a model garden of models that are already built. So instead of saying, I need to start from scratch, to actually leverage things that are already there for the type of data you might have. So Gemini, interactive conversational, and then the Duet products. Microsoft, Azure's AI service, that's their cloud component, so it lets you build everything. Your OpenAI service, so your cloud-based services partnered up with ChatGPT and the DALL-E. So we were seeing that when we first started. We were the end user, but all of that's available as back-end capabilities to what businesses need. Azure Bots, GitHub's Copilot is sort of the developer assistant, and the Office 365, or the Microsoft 365, enabling all those tools. Email summaries. That's one of the things. You probably see that if you use Gmail for your personal one, you probably notice it wants to write your emails for you and like suggest everything. Just imagine that applied to business with somebody who has to just answer emails over and over all day to have it kind of predict. I'm just ready for the button. I can just say, just answer my email for me, and just go on with my day and not have to worry about it. I don't think we're there yet. I'm not ready for that yet. Now, Amazon's got a lot on the cloud side. And I think there's a speaker, might be even coming up next, on AWS side of things. So there's a bunch of stuff in there. A lot of it is cloud-based, but a lot of them are tools that are enabled. So if you're on AWS on the platform, all these tools are available there as well. Just they've each got their own variation on them. Now, Hugging Face is an interesting site. It is probably the biggest machine learning community out there for open development. So I'll grab this here. So Hugging Face basically has models and data sets and spaces and everything if you're looking to do this open source. If you're looking to say, hey, in my industry grant, we can't even touch cloud or anything like that. We need to run it in-house. You do find a lot of these as portable kind of options where you can run them on air-gapped now, or, well, you can introduce them to more secure environments because they're not having to be run up in the cloud. And so there's a lot of demo programs in there. Okay, so hopefully you found this interesting. I got a few more slides because I got to send you with the warnings, and we'll wrap up by looking at an operational type application I could build. What do I do when I get back to work? You got to find the low-hanging fruit. You got to find sort of what's going to give you minimal risk and maximum value out of there. So maybe you're going to start using ChatGPT. Maybe you're going to start exploring. Maybe you get a license. Maybe you sit down, take one or two of your more technology-oriented folks and have them say, hey, go play with ChatGPT. Let us know, is this going to streamline some stuff we can do? And then have them present to their colleagues. Start to take a look. Just put together some proof of concepts. Now, high risk, high effort, high value is going to be things like chatbots. So those aren't necessarily the first thing you jump towards. What they need is we need to gain that sort of expertise in things. But there are lots of different ways to begin using, and just you look for in your business, where can I find these? Now, a lot of times we're tempted we should build it. But a lot of times we can buy things. Okay, you can buy a lot of these tooling in your cloud providers or in open source type capabilities. You just have to get the skills for it. You have to skill up to how to use them. But it doesn't take a lot to skill up. So build versus buy is always one of those standard business strategies. Which one do I do? We don't build our own word processors anymore. You know, it's been a long time since companies built their own word processors. But what do? We tend to buy those, right? And now we tend to subscribe to them. Well, almost all of these are subscription-based, so you can shut them down pretty quickly if they're not working for you. So, and then on the back end. Now, there are open source models. They might take specialized development teams, but if the effort's put in, maybe there are options in there. So you figure out where does your internal teams, what tools do they need, and skill them up on it. Now, the last part, though, is thinking about what are responsible AI principles. Because if we think about the end of the keynote this morning, it really talked about we got to make sure that AI and generative AI and all this is helping us, that we don't end up being the ones who are becoming, that we're helping them, right? It's them versus us. The AI is here. Yeah, through robot, I'm getting Asimov. I keep having to channel Asimov here. Be accountable to people. Let people know when AI is being used. Respect privacy. Models are trained with personal data, make sure it's kept secure. Or if you are training, you have to look at responsible AI type techniques that are used to basically sterilize the data you're using, to simulate the data if it's possible when you're developing, to basically look at your samples and ensure that there are individually identifiable information can be derived. Ensure AI only works as intended. Now, ensure AI works only as intended. Now, this is an interesting one because we often get in where if you ask for violence or other things, most chatbots won't return you information. They'll come back and say that's a violation of my my programming, and we'll see that a little bit. And we also have to strive for fair, unbiased type use. Now, you can take a look at a good starting point for this. It's actually look at ai.google responsibility. And Google's got a website devoted to what they're doing with AI. And they basically have the 7 rules that they start with, and these become their pillars of it, and what they're not going to pursue in AI. And so it serves as a really good starting place to help organizations kind of build from that. So, yeah, there's a lot of going on. Thoroughly test. And you also have to do adversarial testing to detect security flaws. You have to assume, just like any other program, there is going to be somebody who's going to try to hack it. Provide humans a way to opt out. Keep training data secure, encryption, anonymized PII. Don't log sensitive information. So as we use this in healthcare, we're very careful because of things like HIPAA and other practices. And analyze the data sets to make sure, as much as possible, all your groups are represented in what you intend to use that model for. Now, some of the buzzwords you hear about generative AI, it hallucinates a lot, okay? Hallucination is to describe when it returns incorrect answers to their users. You have to verify, trust but verify. We'll quote Reagan from the 80s, right? Trust but verify here that we do it. They'll write incorrect answers that actually look pretty credible. Now, these are getting better, obviously, every iteration. But one of the most common things you have to realize about an AI model is if you say 1 + 2, what does 1 + 2 equal? It's not doing the math in most cases. It's just seen 1 + 2 so many times, it basically says it's 1 + 2, it's always 3. So, but it doesn't understand that math. Now, the newer algorithms would say, I'm seeing numeric values, I should extract those and perform the calculation, but that takes that understanding, and we've got to have seen that case enough. Now, the other one, and I don't know if everybody caught all the joke in the video, a lot of generative AI hallucinates a 6 finger. Knuckles, you look at knuckles, you look at the hands. Generative AI does not like hands. Robots think we should have 6 fingers or something like that. So make counting binary on your hand a little bit easier. But I use 10 bits to calculate. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3, there's 4, there's 5, there's 6, there's 7. My daughter gets out of jail once for showing the number 4. All right, but yeah, knuckles. There's a lot of problems in these generative AI type systems. We don't know why, right? It's kind of like, why don't we know why, Grant? Well, it's kind of natural to us, but it's an odd number. It's a prime number. Okay, think of it that way. It's like, yeah. Bias. Bias is one of the biggest things. Bias, do you represent the data? You know, are you, when you're dealing with people, categorization, things like that, are you not representing everything? Okay, it's a medical study. Do you have more of your population as men than women? So it downplays that. Does it take race, gender, orientation, things like that? It needs to be able to make sure that how you're going to use that model works appropriately. Data analysts have to learn how to find the bias in the model. Adversarial tester to determine if your models are biased, to actually go through and do they understand. We hear about this one in the news all the time. Feedback mechanisms so somebody can report a bias results, and log and analyze what you're doing so you understand how your responses were coming back and you're doing analysis. Hacking. Hacking is one of those areas that we have to. The moment somebody realizes you're using any sort of AI underneath something, their goal is to do things like get a system to do something it wasn't supposed to do. Okay? Getting a system to reveal the underlying data. There is literally hacking 101 of generative AI is to figure out, did ChatGPT train on all Stephen King and all those? Is that data in there somewhere? Okay, context examples. So basically, you have a model that watches a model. There's actually designs where you actually will have something that's screening, you know, a simple model to say, these are the prompts we're sending in, and make sure that they make sense before we actually send them to the main model. They're basically gatekeepers and things. So there's a lot of, as you start to productionalize things. And, you know, take user input and output prior to returning the user, make sure it's not inappropriate contact. And then there's that intellectual property. This is the big one right now. When you start playing with public, non-paid type versions, you almost should certainly, unless you find it in the print that they will not use your data, your data is going to be used. All these free sites that are offering things, you are the product on these, okay? Now, you can look at Google, you can look at ChatGPT, and you find out what their terms, but it's all these other ones that they may be using those underneath, but what you might find is they're preserving what you're doing and using that to then market or otherwise. So, paid services, your data is typically, when you do it in the cloud, when it's your cloud project or your cloud account doing it and you're paying for that service, it's almost certainly yours. But those are things that everybody's kind of worried about. All right, so as one final thing, I'm going to do a demo. What does it look like to actually productionalize this stuff? So I'm going to jump in, and I'm going to use Google Cloud. I'm going to use their Vertex AI. So this is what the Google Cloud versus using Amazon versus using Azure. So Google puts all of their AI tools under a platform they now call Vertex AI. And over here, they can say, well, what do I want to do? Am I working with Jupyter Notebooks where I need to go program? Do I want to work with the Model Garden? Do I actually want to start building my own? So Model Garden, it's just like, they call it the Rocket Garden out here, where all the rockets are. Is that somebody, I think various places use Rocket Garden. You know, they got a Model Garden. And here's where I can actually get into the pre-trained multitask models, and I can go and start using these. And you'll notice in here, it's not just the Google models and others. And more of these very fine-tunable models. So a lot of the work is built. So if you're reading about a model, you might find that you don't need to go, well, how do I even get started with this? You need a place that's going to manage the training of that model. So that's where we use the Google model, the Google Model Garden here. We also use their Vertex AI Studio to go in here and start building things. So I'm going to start building a prompt. Now, I want to basically build what I want. So earlier, in fact, I've got one here. Let me grab my models that I've built. Where did I build? Where's my model? My prompts, here we go. Oh, I thought I saved one. Oh, maybe I didn't save it. All right, we'll create one. So I'm going to create myself a prompt. I'm going to say, write me a recommendation letter. and we'll put, for Space Camp, we can do exactly what we did earlier, but then that can actually be saved and repeated, and I can generate the code. So if you're looking, how do I embed this in my programming? How would I actually go and do that? In fact, I've got that over here. Let me just open up my file. I created one earlier. Just a simple, here we go. I think this is it. Nope, that's not what I was after. All right, where did I put this? Here we go. So here, I've actually written some Python code using that Vertex AI platform. This little block of Python is actually going to call the generative AI engine. So I'm looking to add a little bit to just an internal tool, a little internal web page to say, here's where we can go build the official recommendation letters. And cross our fingers. So prompt, my name is Nancy. I'm the manager of the Space Camp program in Huntsville, Alabama. Okay? Oh, the chatbot came back and said, nice to meet you, Nancy. All right, and then what did we get? Oh, and our second prompt was, write me a college recommendation for Alice, a counselor at Space Camp for 2023. Excellent reviews, campers really enjoy. Use my name and job from the from line. It's gone and created what we need here. So operationalizing. This hopefully is not too far of a jump to see how you might operationalize generative AI for your developers. So, all right. So that I think that we'll do some question and answer here. Let me just bring up our closing slide. So does everybody feel they learned about generative AI a little bit more and what it's doing? Good. Did we see some good practice examples? Everybody's got some ideas. You're inspired and you're going to have an exciting rest of your time here and be like, yeah. Now you're going to hear a lot more, and some of those sessions are going to go really deep. There are some amazing lectures coming up this week. So we took a look at a lot of different offerings and some next steps. Now, if you like, that's a link to my organization's website. We've written 10 classes on generative AI and things like that. So if you want to grab a picture of that, you can. But after this, we can take questions. So if anybody's got anything they'd like.
We have a microphone available if someone has a question.
Do you tend to find one product, say from Microsoft or Google, better at some things than another one?
What you tend to see is more in business which platform the organization is already using is probably the most dominating choice. So if a company is heavily using AWS, they tend towards the AWS tools. Whereas, if being multi-cloud is always a good strategy, but it's often a tough sell in the business because the business we have these big contract agreements. They all tend to offer the similar capabilities. Now, if you asked me that question a few years ago around cloud, we would say each cloud sort of has their specialty areas, but they've so leveled each other out. So to kind of remain agnostic here, we do see Google leading the way with a lot of the ML sort of area because that's what they do by nature. We see Amazon they have such a large customer base, so they have a lot of power that they can put to that. And Microsoft partnering up with ChatGPT gave them a really accelerated. So everybody's kind of on a good level field right now. Now, what does that look like a year from now or two? So I can't say there's any one better than the other, especially where your experience is, what you already have. So
how big does your data need to be to warrant having an internal system developed?
Okay, so how much data do you need? Okay, so for example, and this is just, I will jump back here to my model. I'm going to go use a model that I built earlier this week, actually I built it last week, but I fired it up here. Over in Vertex AI, actually, let me just pop over here. I built a model using 500 images of chest x-rays, 500 patients who had pneumonia, and 500 that had been expertly labeled as not having pneumonia. And that was actually probably 5 times as much as I needed to proof of concept the model. So you can do it with hundreds of images. So just to give you what does that actually look like here, let me go to my Vertex, sorry, jumped to the wrong one here. I'm going to pop down here to my data sets. So my data sets, here's my pneumonia data set, and I had uploaded, let's see, 500 images of normal chest x-rays of patients, radiologist labeled it, and 493 of those are rejected. 7 of the images were just malformed or so. And I trained a model for about 4 hours on that using sort of the generative AI where it figured out what sort of model would relate those all together. And then once I have that up and running, I have the model sitting in my model platform, my model registry. I've got it deployed here. And for those of you who maybe work in ML, it's getting 94% of images that were normal patients, it's telling me they're normal. And 6% of them, it thinks they had pneumonia. Now, those 6% could actually be they were miscategories. We missed something that was in the image. And so that's my false positives there. People who thought were normal, if we're testing for normal. Pneumonia, it found 2% it probably flagged as normal, but the other 98%. And that was literally with about 20 minutes work uploading my images and then about a 3-hour training job. So, and I can actually test that out here. So I upload an image, I should have it here. Let's see, should that have that? My data sets, pneumonia, here we go. Chest x-rays, let me grab one here. My training set is a lot larger. It's got about 5,000 images, so I didn't use all of them. So I'll just grab one here. And that model is now operationalized in an afternoon. Just thinking about it. And that person, 98% likely pneumonia, or 0.98 sensitive. Yeah.
So when you're building your own models and you say training sets, can you just elaborate a little
Yep.
bit on that?
Okay, so yeah, so if I pop over here, when you're often, most of the time when you need to develop a model, you need your data. Now, your data might be, and I'm just using Google as an example here because they got nice, pretty interfaces. That's why we all, use that. I might be building images. That's the gee, wow, whoopee, this is amazing stuff. I want to categorize what is this particular device doing? What is this item? I'm at IKEA and I'd like to take pictures of all their chairs because I've got to replace a chair at my house, and which one's closest to match IKEA's? So you take a picture of your chair and it says that closely matches the Farfignugan chair or whatever, the Skoda chair or whatever they name, So we could do that in an afternoon with about 100 pictures, 50 to 100 pictures of each type of chair they have. So it doesn't take massive amounts of data. Now, it might be other types of data. It might be tabular data. So if we've got tabular, and that's the more common data you have, and it might just be 2 simple columns of data. Say, this was the question that was asked on our website, and this is our answer to it. And with a few thousand rows of that these days, with something like with an LLM, you can make a pretty accurate chatbot that starts to automatically respond back to your message. However, word of caution, don't put it in production or you're going to be Air Canada again, and you're going to be giving, did anybody hear what happened with Air Canada last week? Their chatbot came up with a whole rule that didn't exist. So it hallucinated a rule and somebody managed to get their reimbursement. But to proof of concept things, your data is just your data sets. You can think of it like you've got an Excel spreadsheet of data. And you could start to play with that with relatively little, with no programming actually in here. I could take my tabular data and upload it into here and then start to build forecasting models or regression classification type models. So I could upload CSV with my columns of data and then start to train on that. So good example, housing prices. This is why we have Zillow. Now, Zillow was all we didn't have generative AI or what we call generative AI. We just had, here's historical housing prices, and here's the 1,900 different properties we have about a house. We know the number of rooms, we know the neighborhood, we know the zip code, we know the schools nearby, what the school ratings are, all of that sort of stuff. And then we put it into a model. Now we kind of swear by it, right?
This is a question that I've wrangled with a lot working with venture groups. And if you're Zillow, your competitive moat was you built this algorithm and you actually know something. If everyone in this room can build the same algorithm in 4 hours, what's the competitive moat?
The data. You don't get data, you have to have data to actually do it, and that's all of this. What generative AI is kind of doing is saying you don't need as much data because a lot of that data is probably out there in other forms. But it all comes down to the data.
Well, can they just, well, I mean, and just bringing that up is, but aren't people using Scrum to just technically look at Zillow, scrape all the data off of there, and then build their own engine?
Absolutely. So, but it's an arms race, right? They're going to keep doing better and better things. So Zillow is probably now investing heavily in LLMs versus traditional training, saying, here's the historical data, let's use this. Instead, they need to start saying, where do we think the next house is going to go for sale? And let's go do that. That's what they tried to do in the last couple of years. They tried to buy all those properties ahead of time, right? Buy them and then say, we can flip them for more. That didn't work for them for a while because that takes a lot of capital. Because a $500,000 house, you're only getting 2,000 of those for $1 billion. That's a sizable chunk to get your investors to put into. So if you want to have 100,000, you want to have an inventory of 100,000 houses, that is a very big rolling line of credit you got to have somewhere. So, yeah. Well, hopefully everybody enjoyed this session today. Hopefully that was what you were hoping for. It's hopefully a good primer for those of you who are fairly new to generative AI. And yeah, so thanks for the opportunity.